Ferrari doesn't sell you a car. That's the first thing you need to understand. Ferrari decides whether you're allowed to buy one. There's a difference, and that difference is that precise, deliberate inversion of the normal relationship between a company and its customer is not arrogance. It's architecture, built over decades, maintained with a discipline that most businesses would find psychologically impossible to sustain. The engine is almost beside the point. Please subscribe and activate the button to help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can bring you more relevant content and so YouTube can notify you when we publish new videos. In 1963, Enzo Ferrari told Henry Ford II to go to hell. The details vary depending on who's telling the story, but the essential shape of it is documented. Ford wanted to buy a Ferrari. The acquisition was close, lawyers involved, numbers agreed on in broad terms, the kind of deal that seemed, from the outside, like the logical conclusion to a long negotiation between a cash-rich American industrial giant and an Italian racing operation that needed capital. And then Enzo walked away. Not because the money was wrong, because Ford's proposed terms included control over Ferrari's racing program. And racing was the only thing Enzo Ferrari actually cared about. Everything else, the road cars, the revenue, the commercial relationships, was infrastructure for racing. You don't hand that to a committee in Detroit. Ford's response was to build the GT40, specifically to destroy Ferrari at Le Mans. They succeeded, eventually, after 2 years of failure and an engineering commitment that cost more than the original acquisition price would have. That story, the refusal, the war, the eventual Ford victory on the track, is told constantly in automotive culture. What's told less often is what happened to Ferrari's brand after it. Because Ferrari didn't lose that conflict. They won something more durable than any race result. They won the narrative of the man who couldn't be bought, the Italian artisan who chose pride over pragmatism, the brand that answered to no one. That story has been compounding interest ever since. This is the thing about Ferrari that takes time to fully appreciate. The racing heritage is real. The engineering is genuinely extraordinary. The emotional experience of sitting inside a V12 Ferrari at full throttle is exactly as violent and transcendent as the mythology suggests. None of that is manufactured, but the way that reality has been packaged, protected, and converted into commercial leverage is one of the most sophisticated brand operations in the history of consumer culture. And it starts with understanding what Ferrari is actually selling. It isn't transportation. Obviously, you can get from point A to point B in a Toyota. It isn't even performance in the pure, technical sense, though the cars perform, and some of them perform at a level that makes professional racing drivers speak about them with something approaching reverence. What Ferrari sells at its most fundamental level is the feeling of being chosen. Not choosing, being chosen. The distinction is everything. In almost every consumer transaction, the dynamic runs in one direction. You have money, a company has a product, you exchange one for the other, and the product is yours. Ferrari inverts this. Ferrari has a product, you have money. And whether you get the product depends not on whether you have the money. Most people who want a Ferrari have the money, but on whether Ferrari has decided that you are the right person to have it. That decision is made based on a purchase history. How many Ferraris have you bought before? Have you bought them at retail and kept them, or have you bought them and immediately flipped them on the secondary market? Have you been to the factory? Have you attended the events? Have you demonstrated, through a series of behaviors over time, that you are a genuine enthusiast and not a speculator treating the product as a financial instrument? If you are a speculator, if you buy a limited edition Ferrari for the sole purpose of immediately listing it at a markup, Ferrari will eventually notice. And the next time a significant allocation becomes available, your name will not be on the list. This is not a formal policy you'll find in any dealer contract. It's a cultural understanding, enforced through relationships, communicated through the invisible network of authorized dealers who know which clients are welcome and which are tolerated. Ferrari manages its customer base the way a private club manages its membership, carefully, deliberately, with a long institutional memory for who behaved well and who didn't. The result is something extraordinary from a business perspective. A company whose most desirable products have waiting lists filled with people who have already proven their loyalty through prior purchases, and who must continue demonstrating that loyalty to maintain their position in the queue. The customers are competing for the right to spend money, not casually competing, investing real time, real attention, and significant prior capital into maintaining a relationship that might, if they're patient enough and careful enough, eventually earn them an allocation of the car they actually want. There is no other mass consumer brand on earth with that kind of structural power over its own customers. Lamborghini was born from an insult. The story has probably been cleaned up in the retelling, but the core of it is consistent across sources. Ferruccio Lamborghini, a successful tractor manufacturer from the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy, complained to Enzo Ferrari about the clutch on his Ferrari. Enzo, by most accounts, was not a man who received criticism from tractor farmers with particular grace. The response was something to the effect that a man who makes tractors should drive tractors and leave Ferraris to people who understand them. Ferruccio went home and started building sports cars. Whether that story is literally true in every detail is almost secondary to what it tells you about the psychological DNA of the brand that emerged from it. Lamborghini was founded on defiance, on the refusal to accept a hierarchy that placed someone outside a conversation they had every right to be part of. It was built, from the very beginning, for people who had enough and wanted more aggression, more visibility, more willingness to announce themselves to the room. Where Ferrari cultivated restraint, Lamborghini cultivated provocation. The design philosophy reflects this at every level. Ferrari's most celebrated road cars have lines that are beautiful in a way that rewards sustained attention. The proportions are studied. The aggression is present but disciplined, like a very good boxer who doesn't telegraph the punch. Lamborghini's design language is different. It's an announcement. The Countach, the Diablo, the Murcielago, the Aventador are vehicles that look like they were drawn by someone who wanted to make architects uncomfortable. Angular, extreme, designed to be visible from across a parking structure and unmistakable from a mile down a highway. That visibility is the product, not incidentally, centrally. The person who buys a Lamborghini is, broadly, someone who wants to be seen. Not in a shallow or contemptible sense the desire to signal success, to announce arrival, to make the fact of having done something visible in the world, is a deeply human impulse and one that has driven patronage of the arts and architecture for as long as civilization has existed. But it's a different impulse from the Ferrari buyer's psychology, and the brand serves it with corresponding precision. Ferrari is the watch you can only fully appreciate if you know. Lamborghini is the watch you can see from across the room. Neither is wrong. They're different instruments serving different communication needs in different contexts. Volkswagen Group acquired Lamborghini in 1998, and the transformation of the brand under that ownership is one of the more instructive case studies in how industrial capital and luxury mythology can be combined without destroying either. VW brought engineering resources, manufacturing discipline, and the kind of reliability infrastructure that the historically somewhat temperamental Lamborghini products genuinely needed. The cars became more drivable, more consistent, more suitable for the global market of wealthy buyers who wanted the drama without the mechanical anxiety. In exchange, Lamborghini got to keep its soul, or at least a convincing version of it. The factory in Sant'Agata Bolognese is managed as a shrine. You visit Lamborghini and they do allow certain visitors, carefully selected ones with the distinct sense that you are being shown something sacred. The production floor has a quality of theater to it that no Toyota plant tour can replicate. It's a stage designed to make the buyer feel that what they're acquiring was made by humans with genuine passion for the specific object being handed to them. Some of it is real. The personalization process of the ad personam program, through which buyers can specify materials, colors, stitching patterns, and finishes with a level of granularity that approaches the genuinely bespoke, requires real craftspeople making real decisions about real materials. The work is not automated. The person who configures their Huracan in a specific shade of orange with a contrasting interior and a specific exposed carbon fiber treatment has, in a meaningful sense, made something that has never existed before and will never exist again. That experience, the participation in the creation of the object, is part of what's being sold. You didn't just buy a car, you authored one. And the brands understand that the authorship experience is as important to the perceived value as any mechanical specification. Possibly more important, because a faster car can always be made. A faster car will be made by someone within a few years. But the experience of spending a day in the factory, making decisions about your specific vehicle with a specialist who speaks only about your car, who treats the configuration of your order as the most important project currently underway, that experience is not replicable by any competitor at any price point. It's the personalization of mythology. and it binds the customer to the brand with a loyalty that transcends product cycles. The limited edition is the most powerful financial instrument in the supercar world, more powerful than any engineering specification, more consequential to the brand's long-term value than any racing victory. When Ferrari announces a model with production capped at a specific number 49 units, 199, 399, something happens in the market that no amount of advertising spend could engineer. The scarcity becomes the story. Immediately, automatically. The LaFerrari, the Ferrari FXXK, Enzo, the F40. These cars were not simply manufactured in limited quantities because the production economics demanded it. The limitation was the strategy. Build fewer than the market wants. Ensure that every person who wants one cannot have one, regardless of their willingness to pay retail. Create a situation where the only path to ownership for the people who missed the allocation is the secondary market, where prices rapidly detach from anything connected to the cost of production. When a LaFerrari sells at auction for multiple times its original list price, which they routinely do, Ferrari's brand receives that validation for free. The auction house does the work. The bidders do the work. The resulting headline does the work. Ferrari simply watches the number go up and files it into the mythology that will justify the pricing of every subsequent limited release. It's a perpetual motion machine for perceived value. But the mechanics underneath it are more deliberate than they appear. Ferrari doesn't simply build fewer cars and wait for the market to respond. It manages which customers receive allocations of significant limited editions with the same strategic intentionality we discussed earlier. And the decisions are not always based purely on purchase history. They're based on where the car will go. A limited Ferrari sold to a collector known to maintain a significant private collection, someone whose relationship to their cars is one of preservation and occasional display at events where the right audience will see it. That's a different outcome than the same car sold to someone who will put 10,000 miles on it in the first year and then park it at a dealership for resale. Both outcomes generate secondary market activity. But only one outcome generates the right kind of cultural visibility. The right photograph, in the right context, in the right publication or social channel, showing the right person with the right car that contributes to the mythology in a way that a simple resale transaction does not. Ferrari curates its collector base the way a museum curates its permanent collection. Not every piece belongs in every institution. Not every buyer belongs in the universe of a particular car. Lamborghini runs a parallel game with different aesthetics and a more aggressive posture toward visibility. The Sion, the Centenario, the Veneno, these releases were priced and restricted in ways that made clear the financial transaction was largely incidental. The people who received allocations of the Veneno 3 coupes, 9 roadsters, total were not selected because they had the highest offer. They were selected because their ownership served the brand's communication needs in specific markets and contexts. 3 couples, the entire existence of that car was a press release with wheels. Every photograph taken of a Veneno, every appearance at a concours or a private event, every mention in a conversation between enthusiasts, all of it is unpaid advertising for a brand that has trained its most visible customers to do its marketing voluntarily, enthusiastically, and at considerable personal expense. This is the system that most people looking at supercar culture from the outside completely misread. They see the ostentation, the noise, the visibility maximizing design, and they interpret it as vanity, as the straightforward expression of ego by people with too much money and insufficient humility. That's the surface. The system beneath it is considerably more structured. The collector who pays $3 million for a Lamborghini Veneno isn't simply expressing ego, he's buying a position inside a network that extends well beyond the automotive world, into the circles of collectors, investors, brand relationships, and social capital that move fluidly between the supercar world and the art market, the yacht world, the private aviation world, the adjacent networks of ultra-high net worth individuals who orbit the same events and share, at minimum, the cultural vocabulary of extreme luxury. The car is the entry token. What it buys access to is something less tangible and considerably more valuable. And there's a layer to this that goes deeper than any of the marketing analysis. A layer that has to do with what these cars actually do to the people who drive them, not mythology, neurochemistry. What I'm about to tell you changes why these brands have lasted when almost everything else hasn't, because the strangest part of this story isn't the scarcity strategy, or the allocation politics, or the auction room dynamics. It's something older and less rational than any of that. It's what happens inside the person behind the wheel. And once you understand that mechanism, the actual psychological engine underneath the mythology, the pricing starts to make perfect sense. There's a moment, documented consistently by drivers across very different professional and personal backgrounds, that happens somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 RPM in a high-displacement naturally aspirated Ferrari engine, not the turbo cars, the V12s, the older V8s before the forced induction era. A specific moment where the mechanical noise crosses a threshold and becomes something that registers not in the ear but in the chest, physically, viscerally. A frequency that the body responds to before the mind processes it. That's not marketing. That's acoustics. It's also, in a very specific sense, why every other justification for the price is ultimately secondary. The car makes you feel something, acutely, immediately, in a way that is genuinely difficult to access through any other means short of an actual adrenaline-producing physical risk. And in a world where the ultra-wealthy have systematically insulated themselves from almost every form of genuine risk, financial, physical, social, the feeling of sitting 3 inches off the ground in 500 horsepower of laterally connected machinery moving at speed is one of the few remaining ways that the most protected humans on Earth can access something that feels real. This is not talked about openly in the marketing communications of either brand, but it is understood perfectly by the people who run them. The supercar, at its core, sells aliveness. The sensation of being in a body in the world, in this specific moment, in a way that the accumulated comfort and insulation of extreme wealth tends, over time, to mute. The yacht is comfortable. The private jet is efficient. The villa is beautiful. None of them make your hands shake. The Ferrari does, and that emotional reality is the foundation on which all the mythology, all the brand architecture, all the allocation politics and limited edition strategy is built. Remove it and the structure collapses. The car has to deliver the feeling, reliably, every time, for decades, or the story eventually becomes obviously hollow. The reason Ferrari's brand has survived corporate ownership, management transitions, public listing, and every economic cycle of the last 50 years is not the marketing. It's that the products continue, generally, to deliver on the fundamental promise. When they don't, a model generates consensus among serious drivers that it has been softened too much, made too comfortable, too distant from what the brand is supposed to feel like. The feedback from the collector community is swift and permanent. The model gets discussed in the past tense at events where serious collectors gather. It's politely ignored in the conversations about which cars matter. That social verdict, circulated among the people whose opinion actually shapes the brand's long-term value, is the most important quality control mechanism in the company. More important than any internal testing protocol. Now here's the reversal. Ferrari went public in 2015. Partial flotation, Fiat Chrysler retaining a significant stake, but publicly traded shares for the first time in the company's history. The financial analysts who covered the IPO struggled, initially, to fit Ferrari into any existing framework. The margins were extraordinarily higher than almost any other manufacturer, higher than most luxury goods companies, higher than almost anything in the industrial sector. The growth was controlled. The brand equity was, by any measure, exceptional. But the question that kept surfacing was, why don't they just make more cars? The answer that making more cars would destroy the value of every car already made, would dilute the mythology, would convert a brand that people competed to give money to into a brand that simply sold to anyone who showed up. That answer was, for traditional automotive industry analysis, almost incomprehensible. The entire logic of manufacturing is volume. You spread fixed costs over more units. You grow revenue. You gain market share. Ferrari was deliberately, consciously, strategically refusing to do this. The financial markets eventually understood. Ferrari's valuation reflects, now, a sophisticated appreciation for the idea that this brand's scarcity is its balance sheet. The mythology is the asset. The asset is protected by never fully satisfying the demand for it. Which means Ferrari is, structurally, a luxury goods company that happens to make very fast cars. Not a car company with luxury positioning. The distinction matters because it means the competitive frame is different, the growth logic is different, and the risks are different. A car company's biggest risk is a competitor making a better car. Ferrari's biggest risk is something far more elusive and far harder to manage. Losing the feeling. There's a private event Ferrari holds periodically for a select group of clients. Not a race, not a product launch, something quieter and more deliberate. A gathering at a circuit or a private road course where a small number of people drive cars that most of them will never own, prototype configurations, retired racing machinery, experimental setups that exist nowhere else. No press. No cameras permitted in certain areas. A conversation between the brand and its most significant relationships, conducted entirely through driving. No agenda distributed in advance. No formal presentations. Just the cars and the road, and the shared context of people who understand, without explanation, what they're participating in. That event is the purest expression of what both Ferrari and Lamborghini, at their best, actually are. Not products, not investments, not status instruments in the crude sense. Experiences of a specific quality that cannot be fully replicated, cannot be streamed, cannot be approximated from a distance. You have to be there, in the seat, at speed, with people who took the same path to get into the room. The brands have survived wars, ownership changes, economic crises, the existential disruption of electrification, the shifting demographics of wealth across generations and geographies, because they keep finding new ways to make the experience of being inside their world feel genuinely irreplaceable, not just expensive. Irreplaceable. The electrification question is the most interesting strategic challenge either brand has ever faced. Ferrari has announced electrified and hybrid models. Lamborghini is in the same transition. The V12, naturally aspirated, the engine that produces the feeling we described, is being engineered around by emissions regulations in every major market. The sound will change. The character will change. The character will change. The neurochemical response will be different. Whether the mythology can survive that change intact is a genuine open question that neither brand has fully answered. They will tell you publicly and with confidence that the feeling will be preserved through engineering innovation, that electrification opens new emotional dimensions, that the brand is the brand, not the powertrain. Some of this is probably true. The Lamborghini Huracan Sterrato and the way it expanded the brand's emotional range into terrain that previous models couldn't access, that's genuine innovation, not marketing spin. Real expansion of what the object can do and how it can make you feel. But there are people in the collector community, serious people whose opinions have tracked correctly across 3 decades of automotive cultural shifts, who will tell you privately that the day the last naturally aspirated Ferrari V12 leaves production is the day something irreplaceable ends. Not the company. The company will continue. The mythology will continue. The prices will probably continue upward because scarcity of the old product will become another layer of mythology on top of everything already accumulated. But something will be over. The collector who currently has several significant Ferraris in a climate-controlled facility in an undisclosed location is not primarily thinking about their financial value, though that value is real and substantial. He's thinking about the last time he drove the one he loves most, down a specific road in a specific morning light, and the way the car responded to a specific input at a specific moment, and how that will not happen again in quite that way. That's what the brand is really protecting. That specific, private, unrepeatable experience. And all the allocation politics and limited edition strategy and auction manipulation and social network management is, ultimately, in service of one thing: ensuring that the experience remains real enough to justify the mythology, that the car can still make your hands shake, that it still delivers, somewhere in the upper register of the rev range, that physical thing that happens before the mind has time to process it. Remove that and Ferrari is a heritage brand selling nostalgia. Interesting, valuable, but not the same thing. Keep it and the rest of the architecture sustains itself almost automatically, because once someone has sat in the seat and felt what the car actually does, not what the marketing says it does, what it actually does, they are no longer a potential customer. They are a convert. And a convert doesn't need to be sold again. They spend the rest of their lives trying to get back to the feeling, buying the next model, attending the events, maintaining the relationships, telling other people, with a precision and passion that no paid spokesperson could replicate, exactly why this particular object is worth every irrational dollar. Enzo Ferrari refused to sell to Henry Ford because he understood that some things, once sold, cannot be bought back. He was talking about racing. He was also talking about everything else. Luxury power exists for one reason only: to reveal what the elite pay to hide. Subscribe to Luxury Power and hit the bell now. Every week a new secret is uncovered. Drop in the comments where you're watching from. We love knowing our global audience. Everything you saw here is based on real cases, verified contracts, and documented facts. We don't glorify wealth, we dissect it. Do you still think money buys freedom? Tell us in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to see the truth. And remember, even the most expensive life can be a gilded cage. See you in the next video.